The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the first chapter. Glory to you, Lord. The next day John saw Jesus coming toward him and declared, "Here is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. This is he of whom I said, 'After me comes a man who ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' I myself did not know him, but I came baptizing with water for this reason, that he might be revealed to Israel." And John testified, "I saw the Spirit descending from heaven like a dove, and it remained on him. I myself did not know him, but the one who sent me to baptize with water said to me, 'He on whom you see the Spirit descend and remain is the one who baptizes with the Holy Spirit.' And I myself have seen and have testified that this is the Son of God." The next day John again was standing with two of his disciples, and as he watched Jesus walk by, he exclaimed, "Look, here is the Lamb of God." The two disciples heard him say this, and they followed Jesus. When Jesus turned and saw them following, he said to them, "What are you looking for?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which translated means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come and see." They came and saw where he was staying, and they remained with him that day. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. One of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated anointed. He brought Simon to Jesus, who looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You are to be called Cephas," which is translated Peter. The Gospel of the Lord. So who do you think of when you picture a follower of Jesus? What does a follower of Jesus do or look like? Maybe when you think of a follower of Jesus, you think of somebody who did something really dramatic, some really great, important thing. Some of the followers of Jesus in the Bible were apparently able to perform miracles and heal people. Or maybe, just listening to some of the stories about the early people who followed Jesus, they were willing at a moment's notice to just drop everything, their work, their occupations, their family, and just leave their town and follow wherever Jesus called them to go. That's pretty impressive, and maybe that's what you think of. Maybe when you think of a follower of Jesus, you think of somebody who is able, by their words, to somehow really convince others or change the whole community, the whole Christian community by what they said. Maybe somebody like Mary Magdalene, who ran from the tomb and told the disciples that Jesus was risen. Maybe somebody like Peter, who was able to stand up on the day of Pentecost and somehow whatever he said, 3,000 people came to believe in Jesus or something like that. Maybe when you think of a follower of Jesus, you don't even think of somebody from the Bible. Maybe you just think of somebody from your own life. Somebody who by their own faith, by their own trust, by their own sense of God's presence in their life, was able to help others to take a second look at Jesus. To be able to think, maybe there is something to this Jesus guy after all. I ask that question because this week and for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be reading stories about the first followers of Jesus. And that makes us think, what are followers of Jesus? What do they do? What's important to being a follower of Jesus? And in today's gospel reading, the first two followers of Jesus, at least as the Gospel of John tells the story, do something that is really, really crucial and essential to following Jesus, but it's almost not noticed. Those first two followers say they accepted Jesus' invitation to come and see where he was staying, and then they remained with him that day. That's it. They hung out with Jesus. That was all, apparently. They just hung out with Jesus. John does not report that Jesus taught them some deep truth about God while they were hanging out. He does not report that Jesus performed some miracle so that they could be awed. He doesn't even report that Jesus was transformed or transfigured in their presence, like on the Mount of Transfiguration or something, so that they would say, "Wow, this is really the guy we got to follow." They just hung out with Jesus. And apparently, hanging out with Jesus was really important. Because in hanging out with Jesus, they got to know Jesus. They began a relationship with Jesus. And as that relationship with Jesus developed, they began to experience a deeper and more living relationship with God. And it was that deep and living relationship with God that was the center of everything else that followed. And although we often think of the things that the followers of Jesus said and did, They could not have been effective at any of those things unless they also sprung from that deep and living relationship with God that they got through hanging out with Jesus. In fact, hanging out with Jesus appears to be a big part of following Jesus. The disciples hung out with Jesus as they walked with him from place to place. They hung out with Jesus as they sat around a meal together. They hung out with Jesus as they simply sat in the house and shared fellowship with one another. Hanging out with Jesus was essential to being a follower of Jesus. It was central to learning how to speak and act and live in new ways. And although I think we often overlook that part of following Jesus in the Bible, it is, or it should be also, an essential part of us and our following Jesus. Because in fact, being a follower of Jesus has to be grounded and nurtured in having a deep and living relationship with God as part of our real, everyday lives. And although we cannot physically follow Jesus around in the way that the first followers of Jesus could, we also are people who are called to hang out with Jesus. And sometimes we hang out with Jesus simply by being part of a worshiping community. I mean, in the end, worship is finally supposed to be an opportunity to connect with God and nurture our sense of God's presence among us, with us, and in us. Worship is not supposed to be just, like when I was a kid, they would give us these guilt-inducing things. Can't you give 1 hour to God and gives you the whole week? That kind of like, somehow you're just going to make God happy by showing up at worship. And worship is not supposed to be something where you just come to listen to the preacher tell you stuff you probably already know, or stuff that you expect to hear out of the preacher's mouth anyway. Worship is supposed to be this time that you spend hanging out with Jesus, being immersed in the presence of God. And if you leave worship and you go, I felt like I was in the presence of God for a little while because of the community that I was with, because of the songs we sang, the prayers we said, somehow whatever happened there, that's worthwhile because it's hanging out with Jesus. It's making the time to hang out with Jesus. Rabbi Jacob came over from Sherry Torah a few weeks ago to talk to our confirmation class about Sabbath, because Sabbath is one of those, keep the Sabbath as, it's a commandment, the 10 Commandments, and Christians all go, oh yeah, it's really important. But we don't get into it the way Jewish people get into the Sabbath. And Jacob comes over and he talks to our confirmation class, and he always has really insightful things to say, but towards the end this year, he kind of summed up and he said, really for me, Sabbath is about sanctifying time. It's about setting aside time to be in the presence of God. And I find that when I take the time to make time for God, I experience God's presence in a way that I just can't when I'm too busy with the 57,000 other things that we're always trying to do in our life and to kind of fit God in here, here, and here. And often for us, hanging out with Jesus is simply about making time to be in the presence of Jesus without any kind of agenda, just like those first disciples who spent a lot of time just kind of hanging with Jesus just to see what would happen. Sometimes we too can hang out with Jesus in the regular, everyday journeys of our lives. I think sometimes we read the Gospels in the same way that we kind of watch TV shows, where the characters do something here, and then, we're going to go over there. Okay, split screen, and all of a sudden that's where we are, and we forget that when the disciples were going to journey from one place to the next, that took days, and they were on the road for a long time. And occasionally, something big and dramatic happened, and they record those events. As we're on the road, suddenly 10 lepers come up and they scream, Jesus, so we record that. But most of the time, they're just walking along. And they're talking to each other, and some of the things that Jesus said and did probably didn't seem all that profound to them at that moment. But later, those things had an impact in developing who they were and how they were going to be followers of Jesus. Which lends me to start to think, do we do that in our lives? Are we open to seeing God not just inside the room here while we're having worship, but in the kind of regular journeys we go on in our everyday lives? Are we open to what God is doing as we just journey through our regular everyday work lives? listening to what God may be saying to us through the words of somebody else, listening to the thoughts of our hearts and our minds as we deal with an often chaotic and confusing world around us. Are we kind of open to Jesus doing? Are we hanging out with Jesus as we're going through those experiences in our lives, so that we can be open to whatever it is God's saying to us? You know, frankly, that's what a lot of the prophets, the Old Testament prophets, did as well. We often think about prophets hearing voices in the night as they were dreaming, or in some kind of ecstatic vision or something, but a lot of the times the prophets report that the way they heard the word of God, they were just sitting around the marketplace, and they felt God saying to them, "What do you see?" "Wow, I'm sitting in the market, I see a bowl of fruit, and it's lousy, it's rotten, by the way, because that's what happens in the market." Or, "I see a couple of guys and they're building a wall." Or, "I'm looking out over the ocean and I see clouds forming," because that's what happens at this time of day. And it was through those experiences that somehow God was trying to direct them to think about something. Are we also doing that in our lives? Because often it's those moments that we can spend hanging out with Jesus that help us and guide us in what God is trying to say to us in our lives. And I think often for us, also, hanging out with Jesus is also part of what it means for us to come to the meal that Jesus has given us. You know, it's interesting that when Jesus told his first followers, "This is how you're going to remember me," he didn't give them a bunch of pious proverbs that they would repeat and some kind of great little secrets to the meaning of a happy life or something like that. He said, "Gather around the table, eat this bread, drink this cup." And the important thing, I think, for us to remember, especially as we transition out of the Christmas season, Christmas, we were celebrating this real mystery that somehow or other, Jesus can be both fully human and fully God. That is, God is meeting us in our real, everyday lives. God is hanging out with us here, not just out in space someplace. And what Jesus does in communion, at least as we understand it as Lutherans, is the same thing. How can this be bread and wine that I put in your hands and say, "This is the body and the blood of Christ"? It's essentially saying that this bread and this wine can be fully bread and wine, and also can be the bearers of Christ's living presence for you, right here and right now. It's another way of saying Jesus in this bread and wine is hanging out with you, spending time with you, giving you strength and nurture to be able to live your life in the real everyday world that you live in, not just in some fantasy spiritual place. That's what it means to hang out with Jesus. And as followers of Jesus, while we often kind of get fixated on what followers of Jesus are supposed to say and do, none of that stuff really matters unless we first focus on being people who hang out with Jesus. Because for that to happen, for us to be able to really follow Jesus, we've got to be able to be folks who see Jesus as the center and spend time focusing on that center. And it's only then that all the rest of our words and deeds and attitudes and all the things that we think of as our political and our social and our moral ideas should spring from that. If we don't spend time in the center, then Jesus ends up simply becoming confirmation bias for whatever it is that we already think or believe. So as important as it is for us to think about what we're going to be able to do and say as followers of Jesus, it's first and foremost important to spend time just hanging out with Jesus. Hang out with Jesus in worship, in prayer and reflection, and at his table. Be open to being nurtured by the living presence of God in your life. And always remember and always be refreshed with the promise that Jesus is always willing to hang out with you.